Welcome to my studio. As you know, I'm Chelsea Bussy-Meyer, and I'm so excited to have you here on this episode of Workshop Wednesday, where we get to just chat a little bit about proportions and the importance of proportions when sewing, and also for fit. You know, fitting is a big mystery for a lot of us, or a lot of clients and people that sew on a regular basis. But proportions is an aspect of fit that not a lot of people give a lot of kind of attention to, specific attention. And it's really the proportions that are responsible for whether something will flatter you as much as it can or not. So, I just have a few more people joining in, so we'll get those, everybody logged in. And yeah, so as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about this gown. Now this is a lovely vintage gown. This actually belonged to the grandma of this bride as well. And some of the main things that we're going to talk about today are the pattern and print of the material and how that needs to match up to your stature, to your style, so that it's not overpowering you. That's one of the problems right now. The bride loves this gown, but it's really overpowering her, as she's such a tiny little person. You can see this is a pretty small gown, but even so, when she has it on, it's really overpowering. Another thing that's really important to think about is the colors and how colors look on you with your complexion, and also the colors if they're overpowering as well. So white is one of those colors that can easily be overpowering, especially when it is a long sleeve. This gown also has high neck on it. One thing that you can definitely do with proportions is accentuate parts that maybe you don't even have, and that is, for example, if you're shorter and you have a higher waistline, so that proportionally to your waist and upper body, your legs can look longer, and that can be super flattering as well. One thing that is also really important, I find, if you're like a busty person, is to have your garments fitted around your bust, and especially under the bust. If it's fitted under the bust nice and tight, then it won't have as much volume than left on the piece, so you can kind of take away volume that way. Now, this particular lace is really gorgeous. However, as I mentioned, on the bride itself, it's very overpowering. So what are things you could do when a print or a lace is overpowering for you? Well, one simple thing is adjust the amount. So we don't want to change the overall feel of the gown too much, because she really does love it. But we're going to open up the neckline on her, just removing the collar and opening up the neckline for her. Will be somewhat like this by the time we're finished. So doing this, we actually gain a little bit of skin and collarbone in the middle, and that really tones down the actual amount of busyness going on and opens it up for her. Another thing that's really important that you can utilize easily, which they're already implementing in this gown, is that they have part of the garment sheer here over the shoulders and for the sleeves. That's a really nice trick that you can do if you have an opaque or sheer fabric or lace, is not line the entire piece. Because even though this entire gown is white, when she has the gown on and the skin is showing through the opaque places, it also really tones down that overpowering white that you might have going on if the gown was fully lined. Now, another thing that's really important to think about, this is not so much proportions, but in garment making, if you really want to love your piece and utilize it to the highest kind of ability that you can, is think about what is like the end garment going to be used for? Where do you want to wear it? What kind of settings? And for this bride, she's actually having a summer wedding. Now, I don't know if the grandma got married in the summer or not, but being that she is having a summer wedding and this gown is somewhat overpowering on her, we've decided that we're going to adjust the sleeves as well. So I do have one sleeve already adjusted, and so I'm just going to remove, I already took this one off, and we're removing the sleeves. And she did love the idea of a sleeve though, so we are doing just a small little cap sleeve. So just toning down again the amount of pattern she has going on, but also the amount of the color that she has going on is breaking it up a little bit and letting her shine through a little bit more so she's not so overpowered by the garment that she's wearing. And having the shorter sleeve is also going to make it a more comfortable gown for her wedding day. Now, another thing that I wanted to touch on today is, for this particular gown, is the length of it. So being that this gown is already made and we're just altering it, we didn't have the luxury of measuring her length to ensure that we had the right length. And this gown is actually a little bit short on her. So I'm just going to change my angle here a little bit so we can see better. Now, I thought it was pretty perfect that my mannequin was this height because this is actually pretty much exactly her height on the gown. But as you can see, well, from the angle you can't see quite as much, but this could be her toe kind of sticking out. It is about 1.5 inches too short. So when you already have a garment that is hemmed, there's not so much you can do. However, we're not 100%, the bride as well as myself as a designer, with the tool. Sometimes fabrics, especially when they age, they get a little stiffer or sometimes discolored. This isn't that discolored, but it is a very coarse kind of tulle or crinoline. I would almost consider this a crinoline, so I was quite surprised that they used this for the outside of the original gown. So we're going to add another layer of material on the outside. The beauty about adding a material on the outside is, as you hem a garment or skirt, the outer layer, you always want the outermost layer to be the longest layer unless you're intentionally doing some kind of a contrast crinoline. In the piece that I did, that I shared with you on Monday, we did have that intentional contrast crinoline, and the lining was the correct length to match up with that as well. But here we can easily add an extra 1.5 inches so we can get her perfect length, and then we can choose a material that the bride likes better on the outside of her piece. The one thing with color matching though that I will definitely share with you is the key to color matching is always check your color in daylight, so real light outside. Any kind of indoor lighting can always cast different hues and different kind of, even your paint can, in the room that you're looking at the color in, can cast different hues, and you can think that you have a perfect match, and then you make it, you put all the effort in, and you go outside and it's like, there's definitely a color tone off here. So I always recommend that you work or check your colors in daylight and true light. And here we have the material. We're gonna go with an organza. She wanted the sheer effect to continue with her skirt, but the organza is a little bit finer. And as you can see, this part of my studio has a really true daylight to it. So it's that's why I set up in here today. And another thing when you're color matching, especially with sheer materials, is always lay it over top of the material that it's going to be over top of when the garment is finished. As I don't know if you noticed beforehand, on the roll, it looks a little bit darker and it almost looks kind of warm. Whereas once I unroll it and have a single layer over top of the crinoline, as the crinoline is almost lighter, actually lighter in color than the lace, it kind of takes on a different tone. So this isn't as important if your materials aren't sheer or see-through, but if you are putting any kind of other different color underneath, you definitely want to, again, check the color on top of what's going to be underneath it, whether it be a lining or a supporting fabric. Yeah, do we have a question? Okay. So, let me just change our view again here, and we'll move on. Okay, the points on that one. Yeah, so those are the main different adjustments that we're making for this bride, is her length, her sleeves to tone it down, and the neck adjustment. The bodice actually, funny enough, fit quite well, but this is another tip just for working with older materials or vintage materials, is oftentimes they do become somewhat sheer. So you may find that you need to either add a new lining or replace a lining, as they just, over time, when the materials age, they not only get more delicate, but they can have more of a sheer or opaque kind of effect to them as well. Okay, just like to thank you for joining me. I'm going to just end our live stream on Facebook and remind you that this is now a weekly thing I'm trying. So if you have any specific topics that you would like to be covered on a Workshop Wednesday, then email those in to me. I'd love to support you in any way that would be helpful.